Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, expert in health and longevity and creator of Bogash Life and Balance. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite markers when looking at everything that's happened in the apocalypse, and that's all-cause mortality. And all-cause mortality is a wonderful way of looking at things because it doesn't matter what we call the COVID death, what we didn't call a COVID death, if somebody fell off a building and they were labeled as COVID, or if somebody really died of COVID, all cause mortality and looking at increases or decreases in that really tells the picture of what happened. Because if somebody died from COVID or somebody died from not going to the hospital because they were afraid of COVID, those are still two deaths, both linked to the pandemic. One of which shouldn't have happened, the other one would have happened. But all-cause mortality catches all of this. And what's beautiful about using all-cause mortality is that when we're talking about vaccination, if there are concerns about people having problems with the vaccination or dying from the vaccination, because it is happening, to deny that is completely keeping our eyes closed. What number it is, whatever, we can certainly have a discussion about. We probably won't really know the answers until years go by, but it is clear that there are some people that are not doing well with the vaccination, and it may end up killing them, especially in the initial 2 weeks after their vaccination, something called the worry window. But so looking at all-cause mortality, we would guess that people who are vaccinated would have a lower all-cause mortality because we're protecting them from COVID, and since COVID it's not the only cause of death, but it's definitely a big contributing cause of death, that if we're really protecting, all-cause mortality should go down in the vaccinated group, and all-cause mortality would go up in the unvaccinated group, or at least unchanged. So this becomes a little bothersome when we look at data out of the UK. And I've consistently said that the data out of the US is just short of worthless. We can't look at anything. Some of it's hidden, some of it's not accessible, but you can't use data from the US. And it's just sad and scary above and beyond everything else, but you can't use data from the US because we just don't have it. Israel, unfortunately, I can't read right to left very well, and my Hebrew is a little rusty, so it's a little bit more difficult to interpret some of their charts, even though they have very good data. The UK is doing a great job, and they're posting the data on there. One of the challenges is that it's cumulative, so sometimes you have to look at week by week. These are not published studies, and for what we've looked at, and everybody wants to say, well, show me the published studies. We're not talking about studies. We're talking about people looking at the data and taking out trends from the data. This isn't stuff that's published because it's happening right now, not something that's going to take 6 or 8 months to get published, which is typical, if not far longer. So when we look at the data on all-cause mortality, we break it out by age, which is very important because somebody who's 90 years old and vaccinated, that vaccine may not protect them against much in the long run. If you're 18 and vaccinated, it should theoretically protect you against a whole bunch. But this is where things get a little bit disturbing. Starting at mid-April, which is around when vaccinations in the UK really started gaining faith, we started seeing the all-cause mortality of the vaccinated group higher than the unvaccinated group. This is not what is supposed to be happening. And when we break it out and what's two things with that is when we break it out by when they were vaccinated, because the UK does that within 21 days, after 21 days, and after a second dose, then those numbers become even a little bit more bothersome. There's what we call the worry window, where people are clearly at increased risk in the first couple weeks after their vaccination. To say that this isn't happening is being in denial. When you look at the data, it consistently shows that there is a risk window where people are more susceptible to COVID, and if you're going to succumb to COVID, this would happen in that first 2 weeks. The other thing is that that number is getting worse with time. So while the unvaccinated are following a typical seasonal pattern, the vaccinated numbers are continuing to climb. That's definitely very bothersome. And here's the end result of my end take on this. We may find that in a year's time that this data was nothing, it was just not put together right, that maybe it was a, an effect of reporting or something. There's a very real chance that this is real data. And to suggest what we're doing across the planet, the push for vaccination, that we don't have the answers. This is why when we talk about safety, we're not talking about 3 or 6 or 9 month windows. We have to talk about long-term safety, and long-term safety is not 6 months. Long-term safety is years, at least one season. So if everything started getting vaccinated or ramped up around April, then we need to wait till we go through a winter and we hit next April before we make any decisions about what we can say about safety. At that point, then maybe all of this data will show up to be nothing. Or we may show up that this was one of the worst decisions we ever made. And for me, I always promote healthy lifestyles, which is never a bad decision. But this information, the challenge is that people aren't hearing this. And you can't have a logical discussion unless people understand what we're talking about. And if people understand the other side, the potential risk side, where the data is there and suggestive, we can't have a discussion about risk versus benefit, especially when we start talking about vaccinating our kids. So I will post a link to this particular review. This was done by a group that crunches data. Can't think of the name right now, and kind of put this together. So I'll put that particular link in the comment section. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, and subscribe to the channel.